So what I'm interested in my research is how the world is governed and how decisions are made that affect everybody across the globe. In particular, I'm interested how a grouping like the Group of 7, the G7, or the Group of 20, the G20, make these kind of decisions. Now, a lot has happened over the last decade since 2008 and the global financial crisis. So now we have the rise of a G20, which is seen to be much more inclusive. It has developing countries as well as developed countries, and is seen to be a lot more legitimate. And a lot of people argue that this has replaced the G7, the Group of 7, which is much more elitist, a group of Western countries plus Japan. So within these developments, the rise of a G20 and the decline of a G7, what I've done in my research is look at the role of China, South Korea and Japan. Since 2008, I've been attending a lot of these conferences. As you can see behind me, I've been accredited as a journalist working in the media centre at G7 and G20 summits. And I've been asking questions about what Japan's role is in these summits, how has China responded to the G20, and how has South Korea responded as well. In the case of China, it's clear that China is taking on global responsibilities that it didn't take on in the past. It hosted a very successful G20 summit 2 years ago, and it's really built on the reputation as being a global leader. In the case of South Korea, again, it was the first East Asian country to host a G20 summit and put a lot of effort into ensuring that the summit was successful. So it clearly wants to be seen as an important, responsible member of international society. Looking at Japan in particular, which has been my major focus, an interesting development is that Japan has responded a little bit ambivalently to the change from G7 to G20. Japan put a lot of emphasis on the G7. It was the only Asian member. It regarded the G7 as a recognition that it was a member of international society. The United Nations, for example, had excluded Japan up until 1956, and it still isn't a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So Japan had a lot of emotional value attached to the G7. The G20 came along, and Japan wants to see it succeed, but it doesn't want to see it replace a G7 in which it has put such value. So Japan has sort of responded in a slightly ambivalent way. However, next year it will host its first G20 summit. I will be there, and I expect to see Japan playing a different role and being much more engaged with the G20 process. So for East Asia, there's a lot of very interesting questions about G7 and G20 summitry.